welcome to the MedEClasses postgraduate lecture series. We'll be focusing today on a very important, although a rare but complicated topic of hypercalcemia. We had this 3-year-old boy who presented with bone pain and had found to have a high level of calcium where the phosphorus was on the normal level. Now, when I discuss about the pathophysiology, we'll understand that calcium and phosphorus, both of them we have to assess in a proper fashion to achieve a right diagnosis in that perspective. Now, on evaluation, first step you always look at is the PTH level. Now, there the PTH level was low, which was in a way indicated by the phosphorus level, which was normal, because if your PTH is high, you expect the phosphorus level to be on the lower side. So this was a PTH independent form of hypercalcemia. The vitamin D level was found to be normal and calcitriol level was also normal, excluding a vitamin D form. So often we consider, okay, when you have hypercalcemia, you either have a PTH or a vitamin D related cause. Both these causes have been excluded in this scenario. So what we are looking at is a rare scenario. And what was found that there was a lytic lesion which was present in this scenario, which resulted in the diagnosis of a lymphoreticular malignancy, leukemia. So hypercalcemia, though usually endocrine, may also have significant component of other disorders which we have to be aware about, and that's why we need to be cautious about. So over the next hour or so, we're going to focus about the practical aspects of pathophysiology of hypercalcemia, evaluation, management, and case-based assessment. All of you are welcome to go to our website, learning.growsociety.in, which has got a lot of resources with regards to pediatric endocrinology, including a lot of training opportunities which are there. We have got our YouTube channel, which has got a lot of information, along with validated courses on different aspects of pediatric endocrinology, including fellowship programs and the postgraduate programs which are available. We do frequent grand rounds along with the approaches and postgraduate lecture series which we are doing today. There are publications and mobile applications which can be used for day-to-day care. So when we talk about the calcium level, most of the calcium is actually stored in the bones, and only 1% of the calcium which is there of the total body is actually able to meet with the blood circulation. So it's only this 1% that we are going to focus about when we talk about hypo or hypercalcemia. Now, out of this calcium, around 40% is bound to albumin, and the albumin binding depending upon the acid-base status of the body. Around 10% is bound to phosphorus. So in conditions where you have high phosphorus, you will have a level of calcium levels which will actually go down. Similarly, if you have scenarios where your albumin levels are high, you would expect your total calcium to go up while your free calcium level is normal. And ultimately, it's the free or the ionic calcium which is the most important, which represents around 50% of the calcium in that perspective. So in scenarios, we have often been aware about conditions of hypoalbuminemia and how hypoalbuminemia causes pseudo-hypocalcemia. Similarly, if you have high levels of proteins because of any conditions, your total calcium levels will be high, while your ionic calcium will be unaffected, resulting in a condition of pseudo-hypercalcemia. So this is something we need to be aware about. So always better to have your ionic calcium, which is measured in that perspective. A word about calcium homeostasis. So essentially, when we talk about calcium homeostasis, we are talking about 3 major organs which are playing a role and 3 major hormones which are playing a role. So we have got the intestine, which is the chronic source of calcium, and long-term abnormalities which are there in terms of calcium are related to often to the intestinal absorption. We have got the acute source, which is the bone, which will immediately give the amount of calcium if you have deficiency. And of course, minor player is the kidneys, which is going to retain the calcium. Now, this whole process is regulated via 3 groups of organs. The most important of them are the parathyroid group of hormones, which are basically hypercalcemic and hypophosphatemic. They will increase the calcium and they will decrease the phosphorus. We've got calcitriol, which is in a way PTH dependent, but it increases the calcium absorption from the intestine, increasing both calcium as well as phosphorus. And finally, we have got calcitonin, which is basically a hypocalcemic hormone. Now, since the body has evolved in calcium deplete state, if you look into that, the evolution for conservation against hypocalcemia is much more as against conservation against hypercalcemia. So calcitonin is a minor player as far as the overall regulation of the calcium homeostasis is concerned, because if you look at conditions wherein the calcitonin levels go really high, if you think about a medullary carcinoma thyroid where the calcitonin level goes 1,000 times the normal level, still you do not develop hypocalcemia. Similarly, when you remove basically the thyroid gland completely, you're also removing the source of calcitonin and you do not develop hypercalcemia. So calcitonin is a borderline player in terms of overall regulation. And this is very important because when we are treating hypercalcemia, we give calcitonin, it is only effective for some time because there is a tachyphylaxis which develops in that perspective. Now, the body basically senses the calcium level using a calcium sensing receptor. If this calcium sensing receptor is active, your PTH level will come down, 1-alpha hydroxylase level will come down, and the calcitriol level will come down. So in a way, you will be regulating your level in that perspective, and there will be an increase in calcitonin. So increased activity of the calcium sensing receptor, i.e. hypercalcemia, will result in low PTH, increase in urinary excretion of calcium, and increase in calcitonin secretion, which will then try to restore the entire process in that perspective. Now, there are broadly speaking two causes of hypercalcemia. You have got the PTH related causes, and once your PTH goes up, you also tend to lose phosphorus from the urine. So these conditions will be associated with hypophosphatemia. And the second important condition would be that of vitamin D excess. So whether you are taking more vitamin D, whether the body is converting more to 1-alpha hydroxylase, or there is decreased inactivation of vitamin D, whatever cause you're looking at, you will have a high level of calcium along with a high level of phosphorus. So the most important investigation to look at in a child with hypercalcemia is phosphorus. Everybody with hypercalcemia, we expect the phosphorus to be on the lower side because it's usually the PTH related. But if your phosphorus is also high, either you are having more vitamin D in the system, or there is less amount of bone resorption, as in immobilization or hypophosphatasia, or there is increased bone resorption, then your calcium and phosphorus is high. So phosphorus is a very important thing to look at in that perspective. So just to summarize, PTH increases calcium while decreasing phosphorus level. Calcitriol increases both calcium as well as the phosphorus levels and also increases the urinary calcium excretion. So if you have a high level of vitamin D, you will develop a hypercalciuria. Third important point is that calcitonin basically decreases your level of calcium and phosphorus while increasing the urinary excretion. So it's basically trying to decrease your calcium from that perspective. Now, a very important point which is there when we are comparing the effect of PTH versus the effect of calcitriol, the PTH is actually retaining urinary calcium, while vitamin D is increasing urinary calcium. But still you will have hypercalciuria in the setting of hyperparathyroidism because your absolute calcium levels go high. So for the same level of calcium, a normal individual versus a hyperparathyroid individual, the hyperparathyroid individual will have a lower urinary calcium excretion. Now, what it means is that if you have a vitamin D related hypercalcemia versus a hyperparathyroidism related hypercalcemia, which of this is expected to cause more nephrocalcinosis, Dhwani?
Vitamin D related.
Vitamin D related, because your PTH will come down. And your PTH comes down, you can't conserve that calcium, it will be lost. So that's why if you look at many patients with long-standing hyperparathyroidism may not really have nephrocalcinosis, while often you will see somebody who's taking vitamin D for a long time will immediately develop nephrocalcinosis because this protective effect of PTH on calcium excretion is not there from that perspective. Now, one important factor which plays a role in the overall process is that of calcium sensing. So as I said, there is a calcium sensing receptor which is there in the body, which basically tells that your calcium levels are high. If your calcium levels are high, it will suppress the PTH. It will then go to the kidney and say, okay, the calcium is high. You excrete the calcium, so urinary calcium will become more. and it will go to the calcitonin to say, yes, now we need to increase the level of calcitonin. So if you have an inactivating mutation in the calcium sensing receptor, you will have an interesting scenario wherein the body will say, okay, we don't have enough calcium. Let's increase the PTH level. So PTH will go up and it will say, okay, I don't have enough calcium. I want to conserve the urinary calcium. So this will result in a condition which will cause what in terms of blood and urine calcium?
In terms of blood, there will be hypercalcemia.
Hmm.
In terms of urine, there is hypocalcemia.
So this will be the inactivating mutation of the calcium sensing receptor, which will cause hypercalcemia with hypocalciuria, which is quite the opposite of the activating mutation, which causes hypocalcemia with hypercalciuria. So calcium sensing receptor becomes important. And as we have discussed, there is a sinusoidal relationship between the PTH levels and the calcium. So as your calcium levels go up, the PTH level will really go down. Now, in somebody who has a calcium sensing inactivating mutation, this curve is shifted towards the right side. So for every level of calcium, your PTH level will be on the higher side. In a way, the body is not responding to the calcium. You will have hypercalcemia with hypocalciuria. Now, within this perspective, now if you think about it, what will be the causes of hypercalcemia in that perspective? You could have problems in which your bone turnover is either less, so all the calcium is staying outside, or it's becoming too fast, therefore the calcium is being excreted. You could have problems of absorption of calcium. This is largely vitamin D related. Problems of excretion of kidney, which is mainly the calcium sensing receptor and the thiazide diuretic, and then of course a sensing defect. So bone turnover can be more in the setting of hyperparathyroidism. Any malignancy which is causing a bone resorption or secreting the PTH related peptide, which is causing that scenario. You can have an activating mutation of the PTH1 receptor, which is Jansen's metaphyseal dysostosis. You could have a lytic lesion from where the calcium is coming, or increased intake of thyroid hormone levels, or retinoic acid as well, which will cause these problems again, which will cause this scenario. You can also have decreased bone formation, decreased bone turnover in that setting of immobilization, where bone formation is less. You could have hypophosphatasia, where again the resorption will take over as compared to the formation, and therefore you will have more calcium and phosphorus in that perspective. An important thing to remember is that PTH related causes here will have low phosphorus levels, while bone resorption related causes will have a high phosphorus level in that perspective. Now, in the vitamin D related causes, which will again cause hypercalcemia with hyperphosphatemia, you will have increased intake of vitamin D. You could have increased activity of 25-hydroxylase, or you have abnormality in terms of 24-hydroxylase deficiency, which can cause that. You can have ectopic production of 1-alpha-hydroxylase, classically seen in some granulomatous diseases like sarcoidosis, tuberculosis, in which you have an uncontrolled production of calcitriol, which will cause excess or an impaired 24-hydroxylase. Reduced renal excretion is a milder cause, because we discussed that it is the intestine and the bones which are the major regulator. Intestine is the chronic regulator and bones are the acute regulator of calcium levels. Kidneys are minor players. So in somebody who is predisposed to hypercalcemia, if you give them thiazide, they may develop hypercalcemia, but not on a routine basis from that regards. Sensing abnormalities, as in calcium sensing receptor defect or lithium excess, if there is an inactivating mutation, will cause hypercalcemia with hypocalciuria. Is that you should suspect hypercalcemia in a child who's acutely sick, particularly if there's dehydration, constipation, abdominal pain, hypertension. Get a calcium level done. If your calcium levels is high, always check PTH levels simultaneously. If your calcium is high and PTH is about 20, it is hyperparathyroidism. Start working in that regard. Look for urinary calcium to differentiate familial benign hypercalcemia from hyperparathyroidism. If your PTH level is under 20, look for vitamin D levels. If they are high, it's usually iatrogenic. If vitamin D is normal, look for calcitriol that will indicate more towards the possibility of granulomatous disease or increased conversion. If both PTH, vitamin D and calcitriol, they are all normal, think of an increased bone resorption scenario like immobilization, hypophosphatemia, malignancy in that setting. So identification of hypercalcemia is very, very important. At this point of time, I'd like to thank all of you for patient hearing, and all of you can go and have a look at our website, learning.society.in, with validated courses related to pediatric endocrinology.